Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Classical Forum for Contemporary Issues. As you know, we formed this after October 7th, in reaction mainly to the terrible atmosphere on university campuses around the world, where sloganeering and thuggery took the place of conversation and discussion. And we felt there needed to be a place where people can express themselves openly and sincerely, to understand different points of view, and in general, to challenge ourselves to think about very perplexing issues that the world is facing these days. It's an incredible honor for me to introduce our guest for tonight, Rawan Osman. Um, she grew up in Lebanon and Syria, if I'm not mistaken. And she's been advocating for peace with Israel. She served on the PeaceCom's executive committee. She speaks for Sharaka NGO, and studies at Heidelberg University. She founded Arabs Ask, and she chairs post-October EV, documenting persecution of pro-Israel Arab activists and organizing Abraham Accords speaking tours. She has recently appears as a leading voice in a very important new documentary called Tragic Awakening that you probably haven't seen because it hasn't become available, on the internet yet. But I hope everyone will have a chance to see that soon. And today, I'm just very, very happy to have her speak to us on uh, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, and prospects for peace between in our region.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it's my pleasure to be with you. I was told that you don't necessarily know much about Lebanon and Syria. So I'm just going to tell you my story. Um, as a recovered anti-Semite, I grew up in Lebanon. My father is Sunnite from Damascus. My mother is Shiite from the Bekaa Valley, from the stronghold of Hezbollah. I myself was a big fan of Hezbollah in my teenage. I thought they are heroes who rescue us whenever Israel decides to casually bomb us. And only when I was in my mid-20s, when I moved to Strasbourg in France, um, that I started realizing that we were brainwashed. Let me explain something to you. Or let's put it this way, the Shiite and the Sunnis do not agree on much. And they literally want to kill one another because they have a vendetta dating back to the days of the Prophet. 1400 years ago, the Sunnis, they weren't Sunnis and Shia, but the Muslims killed the family of the Prophet, his Ali and his children, and the Shia are the supporters of Ali. They are today's Shia, although there are many, many, many sects in Islam. But basically, my mom comes from the biggest sect of Shia, and my father from the biggest sect, the Sunnis. And it was unusual for them to get married, especially that my mom is the daughter of the Lebanese Civil War, where Lebanon is still a very sectarian country. So they were unusual. That means if they married, they are open-minded and secular. My father left Syria because he hated the Ba'ath regime, or the regime back then, and then the Ba'ath. So he left when he was 17. And when he returned from Europe, he decided to stay in Lebanon. He married a Lebanese lady because it was a more European-like country, and they wanted to send us to a Catholic French school. It was one of the best, still exists in Lebanon. So we were secular. We celebrated Christian and Muslim holidays. We always had a Christmas tree at home. We didn't have any problem with other religions and sects. But the only thing, like secretly, they used to tell us when we were children, we are right and the others are wrong. So the Shia would tell you this part of the family, they tell the others are wrong. The Sunnis do the same at school, the Catholics. We had to attend religion classes. They would tell us that we are right, they are wrong. And as a child, in retrospect, I think that I decided not to take sides because they were all my friends and family. So I concluded that they were all lying. And I was simply an atheist. I never believed in a God. There was stories trying to convince us that there is a Santa living in the sky and scrutinizing every thought and action we have. That was ridiculous. Nevertheless, they all agreed on their hatred of the Jews, the Israelis, and the Zionists. And I deliberately say these three terms because they are used interchangeably. We make no distinction. Add to that we see on the news occasionally Israel bombing us. We see, for example, in 1996, when I was a child, we saw Israel bombing a UN shelter. Very graphic images of women and children were shown on TV, and that was unusual. And I remember how we wept. And you hear that Israel does that. They kill children. It's really easy to hate them. And it's really easy to see Hezbollah as the heroes, the saviors. And remember, the narrative was back then Israel occupied large parts of Lebanon because they are greedy and they always want to grab Arab territory. Add to that anti-normalization laws and policies that are embedded in most constitutions and basic laws in the Arab world. Anti-normalization laws and policies forbid people-to-people contact. These countries forbid their citizens from having any contact with Israeli citizens, not on a political, economic level, on every level. Therefore, in the Middle East, if you want to marry someone who is from a different religion, in Israel or in Lebanon or in Syria, you book a ticket and you go for a civil marriage in Istanbul or in Cyprus. This is common because the laws that are still applied date back to the Ottoman Empire time. So every sect regulates their own internal thing. There is no interreligious marriage. For that, you go to a secular country. So there is no contact between the Israelis and the Arabs. If an Israeli couple goes to Cyprus to get married and they meet a Lebanese couple, the Lebanese are frightened and the Israelis don't understand why. Recently, I've been in 2024 7 times to Israel, and I'm always surprised when people tell me they've never heard of anti-normalization laws. And I tell them why people freak out when they know you're from Israel. You get along in, I don't know, in Australia, in a bar, and then you realize, oops, they're Israelis, you're frightened. Because the consequences of breaking the laws can be severe. When I was 6 years old, I was sitting in the back of the car with my sister, Sally, and there was an announcement on the radio. So my father parked on the side, and I remember seeing my mom and my dad were pale because the news was there are 2 ladies that were to be executed for collaborating with the Zionist enemy. And these women, one of them was the mother of our neighbor, Nana Maria, who lived across the street. And you don't even, like my parents, didn't even dare comment on the news. If someone is accused of collaborating with the Zionists, you are finished, you're done. You can be executed, you can be imprisoned, you can be assassinated, killed by a random volunteer. So with that in mind, plus that the Israeli narrative is omitted from our existence. So when we are told that the Israelis deliberately bombed the UN shelter, killing women and children, we're not told the counter narrative, the Israeli side of the story. This is why it was really easy to believe everything we believed. This is why I say that I am a recovered anti-Semite. And my Israeli friends and colleagues tell me, you're better than that. Don't say this. No. If we want to cure this disease, we have to call a spade a spade. We need clarity after October 7th, especially after October 7th. And when I moved to France, to Strasbourg, I knew that my accommodation was in the Jewish quarter, but I already worked in the Jewish quarter in Beirut and in Damascus. There are no Jews, none. So I didn't think that this Jewish quarter had Jews. And upon arriving there on the first day, I went down across the street to a grocery store, a small one. And I went in and I didn't connect the dots. I was happy that I found all the ingredients I need, the same spices I use, until four men entered the store and I heard them speak. And I realized it took me back to our living room in the Bekaa Valley. And after a few seconds, I realized that is Hebrew, Jews. How do I know? When the Israelis were in southern Lebanon, we had very few television channels. So we used to play with the antenna to watch cartoon in the afternoon. And sometimes we would find the Israeli channel. And if it was cartoon, even if it's biblical, we didn't care. We were watching. And we knew when adults walked in the room, they freak out. No, not that. And they change it. So it is associated with something wrong. So when I heard that and I turned, and there weren't any Jews, they were religious Jews with sideburns and big hats. I left my stuff. I stormed out of the store and I ran up to the third floor to my bedroom and I locked the door. They didn't even look at me. I think I had my first and my last panic attack. And I'm not the fearful type. So when I tried to calm myself down to breathe, I looked in the mirror and I felt like a jackass. I was so embarrassed because I was sweaty and red. And I thought, what on earth did you do? Why? They didn't even look at you. And I knew that I had to see the storekeeper who witnessed that for many months now. So I calmed myself down and I went back to the store and I lied to the storekeeper. I told him that I forgot my portemonnaie and that is why I had to rush out. And now I'm back. And he asked me where I came from. So I told him I'm Syrian Lebanese. And he understood this is my first day. He knew what happened. He knew I was lying. And he didn't embarrass me. He was so kind. He helped me with my bags. And I think that day he converted me from an enemy to an ally through kindness. Nothing but kindness. Had he told me, how dare you, I know what happened, whatever. If he was mean, my life would have been completely different. And I kept going there, shopping at that store. I never asked him anything. I was still very skeptical. I sat on the windowsill for months and I was living in a very big house, 9 bedrooms, owned by a lady who said that she had 9 bedrooms and she rents it to students because she wants to help them during their time in France. And then when we became friendly, we realized that she cannot afford maintaining the house that she inherited, but she will never sell to the Jews. So that was her motivation. I used to sit on the very wide windowsills of this old house and watch the Jews going back, like walking, big families. I understood things that are silly, maybe, for anyone else, that some Jewish women cover their hair. They dress modestly. Families are actually nice to one another. And they always went down the street, 200 meters left to my window. They always went to the same place, a big building. And I asked my friend back then, why are they obsessed with this museum? This is Strasbourg. There must be another attraction in the city. And he told me, darling, that's their synagogue. I had never seen a synagogue prior to that. I was like, we know nothing about the Jews. And now I sound silly and naive, but that was my experience. And I thought, okay, they seem nice. Why do I think they are the enemy? I realized that my perception of the Jews in Israel had been formed by the late Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah. Everything I know about them, I never challenged it because it's that charismatic leader who defends us. And I started untangling everything I knew. I watched early videos of Hezbollah, learning their agenda. It wasn't a secret. They told the world since the 80s that they want to become part of an Islamic state, but their version was a Shiite one affiliated with Iran, with the leadership of Khomeini back then and Khamenei now. And I was shocked because they weren't those patriots who were defending us. Then I read the history of our region, and that was shocking because I learned that what we knew from one history class when I was 12 about Palestine is a joke. They implied that Palestine was a country with political borders, and Theodor Herzl, the antagonist in that story, that wasn't more than 3 pages. You learn the name of the antagonist. He is the Zionist, the Zionist movement was his idea. We learn the date of the convention in Basel, or the first Zionist Congress. So Basel, Switzerland, they harbored that evil plan. And then they decided to send Europe, with the help of the French and the British, to send all those Jews from Eastern Europe to come and steal Palestine, and therefore the Palestinians suffer. This is what we learned. But when you delve deeper, you realize Palestine, the very name Palestine, is not an Arab name. It was given to the region, to this province, Syria Palestina, by the Romans in the year 70 after destroying the second temple, the second Jewish temple. So this Palestinian nationalism, this Palestinian idea was made up. It is a legitimate project, national project, of course. But it was a project that never materialized. Palestine was the mandate of Palestine after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And the Jews had a project. They returned to their ancestral homeland after 2,000 years of persecution around the globe. And they wanted to share the land. One doesn't need more than, you can read early writings, Zionist writings. They weren't all in agreement. They had a vision. And through perseverance and hard work, they realized Israel in 1948 after several attempts to reach an agreement with the Arabs who did not want to share the land. Why didn't they want to share the land? The Jews are one of many, many minorities in the Middle East. They cannot govern on Muslim land. It goes against the core of Islamic principles. And if the Jews are allowed to have a tiny land, because if you look at the map, you will realize it's tiny, tiny, tiny. If they are allowed to govern there, they will set a precedent for every other minority. Some of them are not a small minority. They are as big as 20 million Kurds who are still fighting since the fall of the Ottoman Empire for their own country, which is well deserved, and we should support it. And that would set a precedent for the Copts who are persecuted. Nobody cares about what happens to them in Egypt. The Maronites in Lebanon, who are proud of their Phoenician heritage. Yes, why not? For the Berbers in Northern Africa. We have so many minorities, Sabians, Turkmens. We have so many small minorities who are persecuted and have to accept the dimitude status that was given to them by Muslim Caliph Omar. Plus, I understand, and you should know, that anti-Semitism in the Muslim world is different from anti-Semitism in Europe or Christian anti-Semitism, but it is not non-existence like many historians, even a serious Palestinian American historian like Rashid Khalidi claimed. Before the Zionists returned, before Israel became a country, the Jews lived happily under Muslim rule. That is not accurate. When the Muslims surrounded Jerusalem back in the 7th century, the patriarch of the Byzantines didn't want bloodshed. So he told the Muslims, I will hand over the keys of the city if the caliph would come and speak to me. And indeed, Omar came and spoke to him. And he gave him what's known as the Omar assurance. You may, first, Omar, and the Muslims are still proud of it, didn't accept to pray inside the church. He said, I will not set a precedent after which the Muslims will take your churches. You are safe, you may keep your crosses and churches, but there were conditions back then. The Jews and the Christians were not equal. The condition was, you may stay in the city, but you have to drive the Romans and the thieves out of it. And at the end of this very short text, the Omar assurance, it says, and the Jews may not live in Jerusalem. The Muslims were aware of the significance of Jerusalem for the Jews, and they weren't friendly as many claim. You may know that even before Israel came to existence, there were pogroms, one of which was in 1947, when the Syrians back then, the Syrian Authority learned of the UN partition plan, they incited riots against the Jewish community in Syria's second biggest city, Aleppo. And the Jews were attacked and the synagogue was burned, torched. And the oldest known document in Hebrew that was complete, one of the most valuable assets for the Jews, the Aleppo Codex, was almost lost. It was damaged, and it is now kept safely in a vault in Israel. But even way before that, like the Arabs rejected the partition of the land, this is related to Israel. Way before that, let's go to the 18th century, to Yemen. Far from all this, there were two decrees issued against the Jews by the Zaydis, which is a Shiite sect, very extreme. The two decrees were called, one was the dung gatherers, and it assigned a job to Jewish men, and that was cleaning human feces, but we didn't have toilets, there were public toilets. They had to clean human feces, take them out of the city, as well as carcasses of bodies of animals and human beings. Nobody cared if this Jew kept Shabbat and cannot work on this Friday. Nobody cared if this Jew is a Kohen and he cannot, or is a descendant of a Kohanim family and cannot touch a dead body. But this is okay compared to the orphan decrees, and that allowed any Muslim man to take the children of a Jew if he passes away. Muslims argue that it was out of kindness, but this is not how the Jewish communities perceived it, because you can take them, enslave them, convert them, abuse them. Nobody knows what happened to these children. So there is a history of animosity. It is unfortunate. So when you learn that the Ottoman Empire, that was an imperial project, it was a colonialist expansion in the region. When it collapsed, new countries emerged. Lebanon was established in 1921. So there's nothing extraordinary about Israel, about a Jewish state, that since it was established, it was inclusive. It never expelled, like people claim, the Arabs because it wanted ethnic cleansing. It didn't want a war, and the Arabs insisted and asked. First, they wanted to scare the Arabs who were living there. Second, they were serious about their genocidal intention. They thought it's a tiny, tiny place. They can surround them, kill them all, and that was it. But this is not what happened. And that brings us to my last point. Because against all odds, Israel succeeded. Every time Israel was attacked by Arab countries, against all odds, Israel wins. And that is because of the nature of the Jews, of the Israelis, whether they are religious Jews or not. Lately, or a few years ago, after the refugees, Syrian refugees came to Germany, where I live since 13 years, I was alarmed because the reconciliation process happening ongoing between the Jews and the Germans could have been used as an example for reconciliation in many other places in the world. And it is very much needed, even in Lebanon. We can learn a lot of that from that. And it was now jeopardized because Germany invited 1 million, mostly men, who are anti Semitic and misogynists. And I dare say this because I lived in Damascus and in Aleppo for 4 to 5 years, and I know what I'm talking about. And I was alarmed. I tried to speak to people, and they said, Germany, we can export anti Semitism. We're not concerned. Like, we have enough problems. The Arabs are safe. No, they're not. And I add a bonus just on the side information. One of the biggest Nazi officers, Alois Brunner, died of old age in Damascus. The Mossad couldn't get to him. Many Nazi officers were offered haven in Damascus, and they helped set the notorious intelligence system that was used to abuse hundreds of thousands of Syrians. So, all in all, this is our reality. This happens in Europe. I realized that I can't divorce the Middle East simply by moving away from it. If I am aware that anti Semitism is rampant in the Arab world, and now it is spreading across the globe, I decided to go back to university to study Islamic studies from an academic perspective, to understand from a neutral. I'm gonna, yeah, I dare call many of these European scholars neutral to understand how can we cure this issue. Then I started studying Jewish studies, and I fell in love with Judaism. I was surprised with how mistaken I was, and many are, about the Jews and the core values in Judaism. And after a very short while, finally I became a believer, and I decided to convert to Judaism and to make Aliyah and go live in Israel. And since October 7th, I decided to become vocal, and I became an accidental activist because I could not believe my eyes. I was aware of anti Semitism in the Arab world, but I could never imagine that it is that bad. And that when I say if the Arabs can, they would eat the Jews alive, I thought it was me being the melodramatic Mid-Eastern until I saw it with my own eyes, and we cannot allow this. Of course, a lot of geopolitics are involved in what happened, but it is mostly an attack against the Jews and the values they bring into this world. Visiting Israel after a few times, I made thousands of friends. In Israel, I'm a celebrity. We went to a cafe in Jerusalem, and they had no tables. So 2 American ladies left to give me their table just to thank me for nothing, for just speaking the truth, because a lot of people are afraid of being attacked because Israel is under scrutiny at the moment. And we made with 2 rabbis, Raphael Shor and Shalom Schwartz, a documentary on October 7th, naming and shaming many of these infamous individuals who celebrated the attack. And we wanted to highlight the values of the Ten Commandments, and that we do have a moral responsibility to say, no, this is not acceptable. And it is time to deal with the axis of resistance of extremism and anti Semitism in our world, even if we are outnumbered. Let's say it's quality versus quantity, not to sound arrogant, but I think we are on the right side of history, and things are shifting in our region. I'm going to stop here and allow you to ask your questions.
Or should I?
Thank you. No, I just want to say thank you, Rawan, for the beautiful presentation and for sharing with us your own personal experiences. This is something that I just don't know anything about what it's like to grow up as an Arab in any country. And it's just, I appreciate your bravery and honesty in sharing it with us. Sophia, you'll take over for the questioning? Or
Yeah.
how?
I'm going to answer. Okay. So the first question I was just asked on TV now, um, French TV. No, I do not think that the new regime in Syria will collaborate with Hezbollah. Not at all. They are enemies. They hate each other. Uh, they're Shia and Sunnis. They never mix. Had Israel not um, beaten Hezbollah up in Lebanon, the Assad regime would have never fallen. Hezbollah militants, freedom fighters, are serious ideologues. They're not like the buffoons of Hamas. If they could, they would have saved the president in Syria. But they're so badly beaten up that the rebels seized the opportunity, which I think what happened was a meticulous and perfectly executed plan. However, that said, even if they don't collaborate with Iran, I'm not fond of them. And I know that many Syrians, thousands of Syrians, don't want them. They could do what nobody else has been able to do. Even if although the Syrians hated Assad, had Israel killed Assad or the US killed Assad, we would have seen something similar to what happened in Iraq. He would gain sympathy. It is brilliant now. The jihadists killed him. And I think the second step would be to get rid of the jihadis. Now, I don't know how. As I'm not speaking on television, I can say this here. The superpower of al-Julani, the new leader in Syria, is that he can be in the same place with all his jihadi fans and supporters. So getting rid of them could take a rocket or two, or through a democratic process where the Syrians will say, oh, no, thank you, not Afghanistan, not for us. The promising thing is the corridor between Iran, Iraq, and Hezbollah is now cut. And the SDF in northern Syria, in the region known as Rojava, took over Abu Kamal crossing. So no more supply will be smuggled to Hezbollah. What's happening is positive, very scary, because these are nasty jihadists, but this is the situation now. So,
Perfect. So we'll go to the next question. Again, you can look at all the questions or we can go in order.
I'm going to answer something really quickly. I'm always asked, by speaking out, are you putting your family at risk? No, I would have never spoken up if my family was still in Lebanon or in Damascus. This is serious. They would be killed or tortured, even worse. Because my family lives in Europe, I can do what I'm doing. That said, bear in mind that they don't speak to me. They are opposed to everything I'm doing, and they are embarrassed. My mom, after October 7th, said, I wish I had died before seeing you go into Israel. You're betraying your people, which is okay because she's the daughter of the civil war, and she's an anti-Semite. She's brainwashed. She's not aware of that. But no, I do not endanger anybody. Here in Germany, nobody's allowed to visit us except people we trust. And my son doesn't share his address with anyone. We have a criminal officer. I report the death threats I receive to. And this is absurd. By advocating peace, we all know that I would receive death threats. This is our reality in a world where jihadists bully all of us and powerful governments can do nothing about it.
Thank you. Okay, so going next. Let's see.
There's a question here. I wonder if you might elaborate a bit on how Muslim versus Christian anti-Semitism are different today. I know the histories are different. How could you characterize the difference in attitude and beliefs today? So to compare both versus secular. Okay, there is a book written by Jeffrey Heff, if I'm not mistaken, and it talks about the three kinds of anti-Semitism. There you will see en detail the difference between Christian anti-Semitism, Islamist anti-Semitism, and the one coming from the fascist far left side. So it is different, but they agree on their hatred or their perception of the Jews, that the Jews are scum of the earth, capable of doing atrocities. They have no conscience. They care about nobody but advancing their agenda. Add to that conspiracy theories, which all agree on. But growing up in a Catholic school, I can tell you that what I heard is very different from what I heard from my Sunni Syrian grandfather who hated the Jews. The Catholics blamed the Jews for killing Jesus. So every year around Passover, the school would gather. We had a huge theater, and we would watch the same film every year. It's The Passion of the Christ, not the new one done by the brilliant Mel Gibson, but it's an older version, but not less graphic. It was traumatizing for children, and after that, after watching this, you go out to see the statue of Mary carrying baby Jesus that we see every day, everywhere in school. And you learn the message of the film was the Jews chose to absolve a thug and kill, put on a cross, baby Jesus. So this is what the Christians hate the Jews for. And add to that the twist Martin Luther brought to the world when he published The Jews and Their Lies. Again, promoting the blood libels, poisoning of wells in Europe. They try to kill the people around them, kill Christian children because they need their blood for Pesach or Passover. All this madness. Now, in the Muslim world, the oldest confrontation recorded between the Muslims and the Jews was in Khaybar, an oasis in the desert in today's Saudi Arabia, in the Hijaz region. At the beginning, the Jews were supportive of Muhammad. They sympathized with him. They thought he's a poet, he's a madman, whatever he's saying, he's a prophet. Yeah, okay. But they didn't persecute him, but they didn't want to convert. They helped him. He was welcome. But when he insisted they converted, and when he gained power and learned skills and became stronger, he attacked them, slaughtered them. To be more specific, and stole all their treasures. So now, on the streets in the West, when Muslims chant, Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud, Jaysh Muhammad sawfa yaud, which is Khaybar, O Jews, the army of Muhammad will return, and it rhymes. And this slogan was invented by Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, the founder of Hamas. And this slogan he invented became popular during the first Intifada. So the Westerners hear this, they don't understand this, like nonsense. But Ahmad Yassin evoked the Battle of Khaybar, I think, because he didn't want the Arab-Israeli conflict to remain a political one, because that can be solved. He wanted to make it a historical, religious war that will never end unless what's mentioned in the Quran happens, and that was what I learned from my Sunni Syrian grandfather. At the end of days, every Jew must be slaughtered. And the trees, there's a specific tree, trees and stones will call Muslims and say, behind me hides a Jew. And you have to, it's your religious duty to rid the world of the Jews. This is the difference. When it comes to the leftists, and I think you have to look at the 60s and the 70s. Look at the Red Army factions around the world, the RAF in Germany, Rote Brigade in Italy. The Lod massacre back in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, I forgot the exact date. People were slaughtered at an airport in Israel. Most of them were Christians, by the way, from Southern America. And those who opened fire and killed them were members of the Red Army, the Japanese Red Army. So there was an alliance as a reaction to the American war in Vietnam. And then we started romanticizing bloodshed and armed resistance. And the repercussions arrived in the Middle East, and many leftists who were communists or atheists who looked at Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and thought of Baader-Meinhof as heroes, they thought that they should form a global alliance which doesn't believe in political borders. They should help one another. They refuse the authority of these imperialist powers. And they developed an incredible hatred that has elements from both Muslim and Christian hatred against this Jewish entity, this Zionist entity. What I mentioned now, like the attacks on civilians in Israel back in the 60s and the 70s, is what led to Israel occupying southern Lebanon. Israel wanted to create a buffer zone. And after years of diplomatic efforts where Israel showed restraint and asked the entire world to move the PLO out of southern Lebanon because they were conducting terror attacks against their civilians, Israel decided to take action, just like Israel did recently in Lebanon and was forced to take military action into Syria, knowing that there are heavy artillery, Air Force, Navy, chemical weapons that can fall into the wrong hands. Sorry for my lengthy answer, but I think I had to mention this earlier.
It's perfect. That's okay. And
I'm going to answer what's been written now. Since, let's put it this way. What happened in Syria changed the Arabs' perception of Israel. Because al-Assad slaughtered his own people, we have at least 500,000 documented deaths. And the world didn't react. We saw that Hezbollah helped al-Assad kill many Syrians. They claimed they want to rescue the Palestinians, right? But they killed the Syrians who wanted to get rid of a dictator because he is part of the axis of resistance. And then the world saw what the Iranian regime is doing to teenagers who want to feel air in their hair. They didn't hesitate in killing and torturing and raping them in prisons. So the idea of the axis of resistance being the liberator of people that just invested in the well-being of the Palestinians is a farce, and that's obvious to many Arabs. We do not believe it, especially after exposing that they are a drug cartel, that they went behind, or they found a solution for the sanctions the West imposed on them by producing drugs. I grew up in the Bekaa Valley. It's not a secret that around Baalbek, the army doesn't dare go because of the drug production. And it has always been covered by the Shia. And my mother's family are Shia. I know what I'm talking about. Now, the Captagon industry that became almost bigger than the drug industry in Southern America is concerning. So people have very little respect left for this axis of resistance. This is why people thought that Israel doesn't do to the Israelis what these governments or rulers do to us. Besides, the historical signing of the Abraham Accords gave us hope. There is an alternative. You can develop a different vision and work towards it, and it works. So the Emirates was an excellent example until the unfortunate murder of the rabbi recently. Since January 2024, I met so many Israelis and Jews who tell me I can walk safely wearing my kippah in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, but I would never do it in Paris or in London. This is why I think the Arabs changed their mind. And since the war began in Syria, in Lebanon, I wanted to understand what people are thinking. But how can I, like on the ground, and how can I know if all my friends and family members don't speak to me? I decided to build a TikTok account. So I have 50-something thousand followers on Instagram, but we are all, as influencers, stuck in echo chambers. We all pat each other on the back. We need to speak to the Arabs. And I had given up on TikTok. We all did because it's the most anti-Semitic platform. But I thought, no, I want to do it. I want to see, will the people speak to me? And I gain at least 600 new followers every day. I was surprised that people who live in Lebanon and Syria are braver than those fancy Lebanese and Syrians living abroad who are afraid of losing their jobs or being attacked. People on the ground not only hate the axis of resistance, they want peace with Israel. They're so desperate financially that they think, we'll join the Abraham Accords and everything will be fine. They don't understand that it's not as simple as that, but this is promising. One second, maybe what the education caught my eye. Do you think that education for humanistic values and tolerance can change the paradigm in the Middle East and Northern Africa? Yes. The Emirates and Saudi Arabia changed their curriculum after the signing of the Abraham Accords. I know Saudi Arabia hasn't joined yet, but they were preparing for a big entry, and they removed all the anti-Semitic content, and they added content promoting tolerance. You know, since Islam came to the region, you're not allowed to build new churches and synagogues. So what happened and went unnoticed that the Emirates allowed a synagogue and a church to be built. This is historical, like this is a colossal progress. So when they did this, we saw the result. The Jews can go to Emirates wearing a kippah and nobody hates them, attacks them. The Emiratis understood you are welcome in Israel. So they were all hesitant, but they come and they're like, are they going to attack me? And they realize that the Israelis are the biggest huggers in the world. I told you I'm a celebrity. People don't ask me for a picture. They all approach me and say, can I hug you? Unbelievable. And some of them cry. It's the person who was supposed to interrogate me at the airport the first time I went to Israel. And everybody prepared me like they're going to interrogate you. They're just doing their job. She cried and hugged me. She didn't interrogate me when she understood why I came to Israel. And the Emiratis experienced this and they are sharing their stories. So yes, of course, the education, these values can change an entire society. This happened also, this experiment happened in Rojava, in the northern region in Syria that's now ruled mostly by the Kurds. They changed their educational system and included content promoting tolerance, and we're seeing magic. Now, I don't know how successful that experiment is, but they included women in leadership. You can swear on the Quran or on a Bible in court. They're doing good work there. And I think it is possible. We just have to de-radicalize the minds. And after a generation or two, we can see something completely different.
So Lauren has a question in the chat. What is your Instagram handle?
Fantastic. Very good question. I'm going to put it in here, and it's the same for TikTok as well. I'd like you to go see even my TikTok, because that's where Arabs follow me. And now I put 2024. Most of those who follow me on Instagram on the same handle are Westerners, Jews, Zionists, supporters of Israel. On TikTok, they are Arabs. And I can see, because in the insights of the video, I see the exact locations they're commenting from. And it is surprising. Now I started adding English subtitles so that people can follow. I don't know if you can translate the comments, use Google, but take a look and see how our region is changing.
Thank you. Let's see if there are more questions. Let's see.
Could the people in Lebanon take the opportunity to take back their country from the Muslims? The people in Lebanon don't need to take their country back from the Muslims. Lebanon is cool. I lived in Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia. My son was born in Riyadh. I lived in Qatar, in Doha, in Cyprus, France, and in Germany. And I know Israel. The Lebanese are like the Israelis. They're open-minded. Even the Muslims can be cool. This foreign ideology that the axis of resistance instilled in the Shiite minds in Lebanon is scary. And those in northern Lebanon, in Tripoli, the Sunnis, who even some of them joined ISIS, these are brainwashed. They're so poor, so desperate, they would do anything. Otherwise, the Lebanese, the Druze, the Christians, the Muslims are cool. They couldn't care less. Even when there are rockets falling from the sky, they are just like the Israelis. They go out and have a beer together. So there is hope. I hope they can seize the opportunity to take their country back from Hezbollah. Hezbollah now is weakened enough. Once the regime in Iran falls, I think all those who were fighting with Hezbollah, if they don't have blood on their hands, can be reintegrated in a normal society and behave like normal human beings instead of vowing to liberate Al-Aqsa and slaughter all the Jews. I did an experiment. I made a video, 15 seconds, in Jerusalem. The crew was setting up for the documentary. And I said, this is Al-Aqsa, not this, because you could see it in the background. And they told me, are you silly? Everybody knows which one is Al-Aqsa. I told them, you'd be surprised. This is my first video that had more than 1 million views. Everybody's arguing, no, you're wrong, that's Al-Aqsa. They think the Dome of the Rock is Al-Aqsa Mosque. They're willing to die for a mosque they cannot identify. So the cure to this madness is education, because ignorance is our problem. And what do you think about the idea of creating a state for the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank? Okay, I'm gonna answer honestly. I think the Arabs of Palestine lost the privilege of sitting at the table and dictating the terms for a joint future with the Israelis. What they committed was horrific. I translated the videos from Arabic to English. It is unbelievable. The Israelis reached out for a very, very, very long time trying to negotiate a solution. Now, with what the children think, children in Gaza, little children, were jumping on the corpses of the Israelis that were stolen from Israel. Now, you know, as normal human beings, that a child would be scared when a child sees a corpse. I think they need to be de-radicalized. We need the intervention of Saudi Arabia, the help of the UAE, Morocco, etc. But the idea of a Palestinian state is gone. Palestine, the mandate of Palestine, was indeed liberated in 1948 when Israel was established. Now, the Palestinians, or the Arabs of Palestine, who didn't want to be part of Israel, who now demand becoming part of Israel because they know it's a demographic game. You become the majority and then you can take over the country, and the Israelis are not stupid. How many more times should they prove it to you? It's not possible. So my suggestion is very simple. Let's stop talking about the West Bank and let's talk about the East Bank, and I'm serious. Jordan, take a look at the map. Look at the size of Jordan. And it's governed by the Hashemites. The Hashemites are a family that came from Hijaz. So Sykes-Picot, France and Britain, when they were splitting the Middle East, they carved a big chunk and gave it to the Hashemites, a family that came from today's Saudi Arabia. And they were allowed to govern. And the Jordanians created zilch, nothing. They produced nothing. They could have been a flourishing country, and they can, but they have to invest their energies in the right places. Most of those who live in Jordan are Palestinians. So they are ought to welcome the rest of the Arabs who want to fight Israel. From Gaza and the West Bank, they can build something interesting on the East Bank and be proud of what they become instead of carrying on destabilizing the region. Now, I don't know who's gonna use his magic wand to realize this, but if the Abraham Accords could become a reality, maybe the Palestinians can be incentivized to think out of the box, because we've reached a deadlock. How many more times should we see bloodshed? Enough. Kindness, you said, what changed you from an anti-Semite to an ally to Jewish people is that way. Do you think could be the most effective use of kindness for increasing allies for the Jewish people? Should it be done? Yes, brilliant question. I'm going next week to Israel, and we decided to spend a day in Jerusalem and a day in Tel Aviv, because people ask me, the Lebanese and the Syrians, they ask me, do they hate us? And some make statements. They hate us. They want us all dead. They want to take our countries. So I'm going to show them. instead of telling them that the Israelis are open. And this is not enough because the Lebanon and Syria are suffering badly now, especially economically. So a lady, an Australian Jew who made Aliyah to Israel, suggested that a Jewish woman sponsors an Israeli woman sponsors a Syrian woman. And we thought, okay, let's ask people for donations and we will worry about how to send that money to Syria and Lebanon and see if people would accept to take the money. And this is not political. We are not politicians. I'm not a diplomat. I cannot change the situation on the ground. And no, the Abraham Accords will not be signed tomorrow between Lebanon and Israel or Syria and Israel. Israel joined accords with with countries that are stable, especially when it comes to security. But we can build those bridges between people. And I'm pretty sure that random Israelis will accept to donate once or every month to a family in Syria or in Lebanon. Because the $50 that you use to sponsor a family, believe it or not, we're talking not about Somalia, but nowadays it can feed a family for a month in Syria, believe it or not. So we're hoping that this gesture of kindness will change minds and hearts. And the Arabs will see this. It's not only meant to change the minds of the Lebanese and the Syrians. The Arabs will see this and they will understand that Israel is tiny and they need to donate to their own people, to their own army. They're desperate for that. And I'm sure without asking anybody other than this lady that a lot will join and we will post all that on social media. I want people to see it.
Number 15, have you ever visited the Israeli settlements in the West Bank? Have you spoken with Palestinians in those areas?
I have only on my last trip, but speaking to Palestinians, in the summer I had a modern Hebrew course at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And this is the closest I came with Palestinians, feeling the tension in the air, because these are not Israelis. And the people in East Jerusalem have a very complicated legal status. So hearing their stories, of course, I sympathize, but it is not up to them to say, okay, now we want peace, we will accept this and that. They are afraid of the authorities, and they know that whether it's the PA or Hamas, they are harsh, they can be brutal. So they're very discreet and they are not shy. Many of them are not shy in saying, we hate the Jews and we're Muslims, we want them all dead. But the most shocking story was, I don't know if you're aware of what bar mitzvah is. When a Jewish child becomes 13, the boy has a bar mitzvah, if they're religious, bar mitzvah, and the girl has bat mitzvah. And there is a similar tradition I've never heard of in the Muslim community in Jerusalem. I don't know if it's elsewhere in Israel. They told me that when a child turns 13 in their schools, they go to the cemetery, and this child, the boys, not the girls, just the boys, the boys lie in a grave while the classmates and the teacher cheer and wish martyrdom upon him. Now, this is sick. This is what I heard in Jerusalem. Otherwise, Arab Israelis shocked me when they equated Sinwar and Bibi Netanyahu. Like if we're gonna take out Sinwar, we have to also get rid of Netanyahu. He deserves to be executed for what he's doing in Gaza. I never wanted to go to the West Bank because I don't want to talk about the settlements. And I see sometimes disgusting video footage of settlers who are behaving in a horrible way towards Palestinians. It's impossible that someone like a Palestinian leaves their house and then you take over. This is not acceptable. And it's not acceptable even within Israel, except that now the government has an extreme tendency, especially after October 7th. But normally, no, it's not celebrated. People don't share the videos of settlers burning a house in a Palestinian village and they cheer for it, like the Palestinians or the Gazans did on October 7th. No, they don't do this. But I went even further this time because I had security with me. And there are vast parts that are empty. Again, you can feel the tension, checkpoints. It is a very sad situation and it cannot be the status quo forever. And an agreement should be reached, but I'm pretty sure there is a solution if we think out of the box.
Thank you so much. I believe those are all the questions.
Okay.
We still have some time.
Yeah. Well, if there's no more questions, we can thank our guests. If anyone does have questions, please raise them.
Or we can invite the participants to just share how this talk has landed for them. I know for me, during one talk, I have more ideas about the depth of anti-Semitism, which I'm very grateful for. And I'm working on something right now. So you've given me a lot of things to think about and to research further. So I just want to say thank you for growing trees in my mind. Anybody else would like to share how this talk landed for them? So I think that's it. Gabriel?
May I?
Oh yes, Nakshan.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank so much for the presentation and for Voice of Hope. I mean, I think it was a theme that went through the talk, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you all for your time, for listening. So if
I would
go
I would just second that. And I think these last dead 15 minutes, it's not a lack of interest at all. I don't want you to go away from here thinking of this. It's maybe just like we don't get to hear from your type of perspective too often. So it's very profound what you've said, very moving. And if anything, I just feel a little quiet, little need to think about it, and want to thank you for your courage and the way it's given us a lot of information we wouldn't otherwise have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I guess if no one has any more questions, we could wrap it up, right?
Yeah, we have one thing in the chat from Christy you might want to read.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience. It is fascinating and horrifying to hear the stories from the ground, so to speak. Best wishes to you. Thank you all so much. I know it's never uplifting or rarely uplifting what comes from the Middle East, but this is our reality, my experience, the experience of my parents before me and their parents before them on both sides of the borders, in Syria and Lebanon, but also in Israel. And I'm pretty sure you know it applies to many Arab countries. It's time to try and change this.
Agreed. Gabriel, you want to finish?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Rawan, for this amazing talk. And I want to encourage everyone also to look for the video. How are people going to be able to see it?
The documentary or the videos we make?
The documentary.
We still have exclusive screenings from time to time, whether it's in Israel or in the West, in Europe, in America. I think that in March it will be made available online on YouTube. I'm not sure, but soon.
Okay.
The idea, we want it to be there for free for everyone to watch.
Maybe we could do a watch party here on CFCI.
We did it once online and we had 200 people attending. So it worked nicely. People could share their feedback afterwards. So maybe you should consider it. Why not?
Okay, let's thank our speaker and for this beautiful talk and the beautiful discussion and for taking time out of her very busy schedule to meet with us. Thank you so much, Rawan.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay well. Bye.
Bye-bye.